Hi, it's Mark here from the Great Boss Academy. You know, one of the things that I think is really important is that you know that your team will turn up for you and really go to bat for you when things don't go quite right. And I often hear leaders talking about the fact that they really wish that their teams would do that, but they haven't seen it happen, or they're not happy with how they don't go the extra mile and those sorts of things. Well, I think one of the most important things to remember in this situation is that our job as leaders, our job as great bosses, is to absorb pressure but reflect praise. And your team will go to bat for you to the extent that you go to bat for them. And I've got a great great story from my history as a boss when I really found this to be true. And back in 2003, I was working for a charity, and I was on a work trip and witnessed a great example of how an excellent leader really strengthened his team in the face of some pretty harsh pressure when things had gone wrong. The trip was to walk part of the Great Wall of China. We were raising funds for Dente back in the day, and there was about 30 or so other people who were on the trip. And the tour manager had the unenviable pleasure of managing a team of local young logistics experts alongside keeping a bunch of volunteers from the UK happy as well, who had obviously raised a lot of money and were in for the trip of a lifetime. And don't forget, China back in 2003 was relatively a lot less exposed to the West than it is now, and perhaps the levels of customer service weren't quite where they would be today. We were into it. It was going really, really well. Day 4 started really unpleasantly. Very, very heavy rain. And that continued right through till after lunch. And we were on that day walking an unrestored section of the wall. So basically a lump of mud going through the countryside. And the amount of rain had caused a lot of problems with the paths being wet and very slippery underfoot. And that made for some pretty difficult, if not treacherous, walking conditions. And a lot of people slipped, a lot of people were sliding around. I don't think anybody was in any real danger, but people weren't happy. And some of the group, by the end of the day, were really out for blood, and particularly because of the planning and the way that they've been asked to take part in the trip on that particular day. Now, there had clearly been some miscalculations to do with the weather, but what was really inspiring to me was how the team leader, John, really protected his young team and acted as a buffer between the complainants and the team. And it would have been very easy for him to deflect blame onto the local team. Oh God, you can't trust these guys, they're just no good, they're not up to speed yet. But he chose not to do that. And it was a really inspiring example at the time for me, a relatively young leader. And he really preserved his team's dignity, and at the same time boosted their confidence and really reinforced his leadership standing with them. There were certainly some robust discussions with his team, because I was a part of those discussions about what they'd learned, what they would do differently. But those took place behind closed doors, away from the exposure to the clients. And people will only go to bat for you if you go to bat for them. And that makes leadership quite an unpleasant task at times, because you will need to absorb pressure and you will need to protect your team. But your people won't follow you if you don't back them up. So it's really important to make sure that you do that. On the flip side, we've all heard the phrase that when one person wins, we all win, and it's a team effort and those sorts of things. And I 100% agree with that. But it's also really important to give credit where credit is due. So make that a double win for the individuals that are involved as well. So singling people out when things go right, and congratulating the team as a whole for any successes that your business experiences, because that's really important as well. People need to feel like they're not anonymous, that they're just not part of a homogenous group. It's that the team, and we don't ever take any personal credit. We shouldn't take personal credit, but we should give personal praise where it's due. So mistakes happen, goals will get missed, lessons will be learned, and taking the pressure off these missed opportunities instead of placing blame is one of the biggest signs of a great leader. Weak leaders, on the flip side, will deflect pressure and absorb praise. So great bosses absorb pressure and reflect praise. So there you go. That's your great boss tip for this week, and I hope that's helped.